She was sitting in my chair, legs crossed, coffee in hand, wearing the cardigan I'd knitted years ago for cold mornings like this one. Her blonde hair, always too light to be natural, was tied in a messy bun, and from the porch I could hear her voice through the window. Laughter. Light, careless laughter. As if the past few months hadn't happened. As if the house was still hers. Except it wasn't. And neither was that chair. I stood still for a moment at the end of the gravel path, the breeze tugging at my coat, my palms damp inside the gloves. My bag was heavier than it looked, not from the weight, but from what it meant. I'd come back. Not to ask. Not to plead. I had keys now, and a file with court documents, and a decision I didn't plan on undoing. When I pushed the gate, it squeaked the same way it had for 30 years. She didn't look up, too busy on the phone. I'd planted that rose bush. I'd painted that door, and she'd sold it all for a down payment on a bigger house in a newer part of town. The sound of my steps on the wooden porch made her glance over. Her smile froze. The phone dropped from her hand onto her lap. "Mom?" She stood, slowly, as if she wasn't sure whether to come closer or lock the door behind her. I didn't say a word. Just opened my bag, pulled out the thin stack of legal papers, and placed them on the little porch table beside the ashtray she'd left there. I noticed the cigarette butts. Knew she'd picked the habit back up. She used to be so self-righteous about smoking. "You're early," she said finally. "I live here," I said. "You... what?" "I live here," I repeated, more slowly. Again. "You can't just..." "Yes, I can." The silence stretched. The wind carried the sound of someone mowing a lawn down the street. It all looked so peaceful, normal. But peace doesn't mean justice. She looked down at the papers, scanned the heading, and I saw the shift in her face, the tightening of the jaw, the way her shoulders went up. She knew what they were. She knew this wasn't just a visit. "You went to court." "Yes." "You revoked the gift deed." "Yes." Her lips pressed together. "You said it was a gift. You gave me this house. You said you'd look after me. You promised. Remember?" I kept my voice even, but I felt the crack underneath. "You said, 'You'll never be alone, Mom. This house will always be ours.'" She turned away for a second, ran her hand through her hair. "You don't understand." "Oh, I do." I understood plenty. I understood the way she'd started locking her bedroom door when I lived here. I understood the shift in her voice whenever I asked about doctor appointments, the coldness, the wait in the car tone, the way she kept reminding me that space was tight, that she needed freedom, that I could be a little difficult. And then came the day she needed my signature. "It'll just make things easier with taxes," she'd said. "It's still your house, Mom. Just on paper, it'll be in my name. Legally, nothing changes." That was 9 months ago. She sold the house 3 weeks later, moved across the state with her boyfriend, left me 2 weeks' notice and a list of senior living options she'd printed off Google. I ended up in a government-run lodge with peeling wallpaper and a roommate who cried in her sleep. For the first time in my life, I felt truly discarded, like I'd been something useful, and then I wasn't. But I also remembered who I was, and I started digging. The papers on the table weren't just court orders. They were a declaration of who I'd chosen to be. Again. "You're kicking me out," she said now, barely above a whisper. "I'm coming home." Her voice cracked. "I have nowhere else to go." I looked at her, really looked, and for a moment, I didn't see the woman who had betrayed me. I saw the girl who used to fall asleep on my lap, with her thumb in her mouth and her stuffed rabbit under one arm. But that girl had grown teeth, sharp ones. "There's a list of rentals in town. I printed them. They're in the folder. Unlike you, I won't leave you on the sidewalk." I stepped past her and opened the door. The hallway smelled different now. Perfume and burnt toast instead of lemon cleaner and lavender. But it was still mine. I walked in without asking. Behind me, she didn't follow. The screen door swung shut with a soft thud. I didn't cry. Not then. I just stood in the middle of the living room, what used to be our living room, and exhaled. I was home. The quiet inside the house was nothing like I remembered. It used to be filled with the hum of radio in the kitchen, creaking floorboards when someone moved upstairs, the ticking of the big clock on the mantel. Now, silence pressed against the walls like a weight, broken only by the faint buzz of the refrigerator and the rustling of a breeze through the curtains. I walked into the kitchen first. It was cleaner than I expected, almost sterile. No crumbs on the counter, no dishes in the sink. But the warmth was gone. The old checkered tablecloth replaced by something gray and stiff. The little clay jar I used to keep tea bags in was gone, probably in some Goodwill box by now. On the fridge door hung a calendar with real estate appointments scribbled in red. I stared at the dates, counting backward. She'd listed the house only 11 days after I signed the deed over. 11. I remembered what I'd been doing that day. Peeling apples for a pie while she sat at the table with her laptop, saying she was just checking emails. I opened the drawer where I used to keep the kitchen scissors. There was nothing inside but a single takeout menu. The house was still standing. The walls were still white. But everything that made it home, the softness, the small chaos of family, had been wiped out. I stepped back, my chest tight. This was what she'd done to my memories. Packaged them, sold them, and smiled while she did it. The next room was the den. She'd turned it into a makeshift office. My needlework had been taken down. In its place, a big abstract canvas, blue splashes over white, cold, loud, expensive looking. A desk stood near the window, scattered with papers and a half-full mug of coffee. I recognized the mug. It had been mine. A faded floral print from some old flea market. She'd kept it, I thought. Funny, the things people choose to keep. The guest room was empty, just a bare mattress on the floor and an open suitcase. She was leaving, or maybe she'd known she would have to leave. I didn't go upstairs. Not yet. That floor held too many echoes. Instead, I returned to the living room, sat in the armchair, my armchair, and closed my eyes. It took months to get here. After she left me at the lodge, I didn't cry. Not the first night, not the second. I didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction. But inside, I felt like a chair with 2 legs missing. Upright, only because it hadn't been bumped yet. The room I was placed in had a narrow bed, a cracked window, and a roommate named Norma, who talked in her sleep. I didn't unpack. I didn't eat much. I watched the walls, waiting for something inside me to scream. And then I met Irene. Irene was 81, sharp as a scalpel, and didn't like small talk. She was a retired probate lawyer. 35 years in court and not once did I get bribed, she said the first day we shared a bench in the garden. I consider that my greatest achievement. It was Irene who told me what a revocation of gift deed entailed. It was she who read my copy of the original contract, the one I'd foolishly signed at the kitchen table, not even bothering to read the fine print because I trusted my daughter. Never trust anyone who needs a signature fast, she said, folding the paper like it was trash. Especially family. Over the next few weeks, she coached me, taught me how to draft letters, which offices to visit, which judge had a reputation for fairness. I went to the library, used the public computers. I wrote, printed, walked, waited in lines. Some days I came home defeated. Others I came back with fire in my chest. The hardest part was seeing the sympathy in the eyes of strangers. Social workers, clerks, even the woman at the post office. All of them had a look that said, poor old thing, fooled by her own blood. But I wasn't poor, not anymore. I was angry. And anger, when channeled right, is a sharp, useful tool. 3 months later, the first letter arrived from the county court. A hearing date. I remember staring at the envelope, not breathing. I wanted to show someone, to share the moment. But the only person I wanted to tell was the same one who'd betrayed me. So I told Irene. She nodded. Don't expect drama, she said. You're not going to get tears or confessions. She'll lie, probably, minimize, pretend it was a misunderstanding. She won't cry? No. She'll look at you like you're the problem. She was right, of course. At the hearing, Claire wore pearls and navy blue. She looked polished, rehearsed, even regretful, in a way that only served her. She insisted on the transfer, Claire said. I didn't push her. I promised I'd take care of her, and I did, but she chose to leave. The judge looked from her to me. And what's your version, Ms. Morris? I kept my voice steady. She said she'd look after me. She promised I'd never be alone, that this house would always be my home. I signed because I believed her. And then she sold it, moved out, left me in a care facility with no notice. Claire looked away. I think it was the only true emotion she showed that day, the inability to meet my eyes. But it was enough. The ruling came 3 weeks later. The transfer was revoked on grounds of undue influence and misrepresentation. The house was mine again. And now, I was here. Back. She was still on the porch. I could hear the quiet crackle of her phone screen lighting up as she typed. Maybe she was texting her boyfriend. Or a lawyer. I didn't care. I was going to sleep in my bed tonight. My bed. I didn't sleep well that night. Not from regret. That ship had long sailed. But the mattress, the one I'd chosen myself 12 years ago and loved until the day she stripped the sheets and tossed my pillows, felt different now, a little stiffer. The scent was gone. No hint of lavender detergent or cedar from the sachets I used to tuck into the drawers. This house had carried me through decades. The good, the ruinous, the ordinary. But she had made it forget me. And I would have to teach it to remember. At dawn, I made tea. Stood barefoot in the kitchen, the floor cold under my soles. I reached instinctively for the ceramic tin where I always kept my black Ceylon blend, and found it filled with some floral nonsense that smelled like potpourri and tasted worse. I poured it down the drain. It's funny, the things you notice after betrayal. The little replacements. The empty spaces where your life used to be. The next morning, I heard her packing. She hadn't spoken a word after the confrontation. Just sat on the porch for a while, scrolling on her phone. Then disappeared into what used to be her room, my guest room, and started zipping up her suitcase. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. It felt like rot being scooped out of a wound. Necessary, but no cause for celebration. Where are you going? I asked from the hallway, not because I cared, but because I needed to say it aloud. She looked up. Her face was pale, makeup washed off, lips chapped. She wasn't used to consequences. and now they had shown up at her door. "Nowhere," she said flatly. "I'll figure something out. There's a list of apartments in the folder. You planned this." I nodded. "Of course I did." Her jaw twitched, like she wanted to scream, but there was no fight left in her, or maybe just no audience. "I can't believe you'd do this to your own daughter." That was the line. That was always the line. I turned to face her fully. "You're not my daughter when you act like a thief." "I'm not a—" "You sold my home, Claire." She looked down at her feet. "I needed the money." "No. You wanted the money. There's a difference." She zipped the suitcase shut and stood there, shoulders hunched. For the first time, she looked small. Not young, small, as if her own life didn't fit anymore. "I thought you'd forgive me," she said. That made me laugh, quietly. "You counted on that, didn't you?" She didn't answer. When she left the house that morning, she didn't slam the door. She didn't say goodbye, just dragged her suitcase down the front steps and into an Uber that pulled up precisely at 8:01. I watched from the window, not because I needed to see her go, but because I needed to believe it was real. After the car drove off, I sat at the kitchen table and looked at my hands. They looked older than I remembered, thinner, a little shaky. But they were mine, and they'd built this life, this house, this peace, and they'd taken it back. Later that afternoon, I went to the garden. The weeds had taken over the west side. The rose bush was still there, but dry, neglected. I got down on my knees, my joints groaning, and started pulling. One root at a time. The sun was strong but kind. The earth recognized me. That's when I saw it. The old wind chime I'd hung near the back fence was lying on the ground, broken. The string had snapped. I picked it up, ran my fingers over the bent aluminum tubes. It still made a faint, ghostly sound when I moved it. I'd hung it there the year my husband died. Said I wanted the wind to carry his memory through the yard. I never told Claire what it meant. Maybe she never noticed it. Maybe she did and just didn't care. But I cared. So I fixed it. With fishing line from the drawer and a steady hand, I put it back up where it belonged. When the breeze picked up, it sang again. And I stood there, eyes closed, letting it fill the silence. The next day, a letter arrived. From the district attorney's office. I opened it with trembling fingers and read the first line twice. It was an acknowledgement of a case review. Fraudulent transfer of property. Potential elder abuse under financial manipulation. The file had been submitted by the court after my civil suit succeeded. I hadn't pressed charges. I hadn't even planned to. But now, someone else had. Maybe the judge. Maybe Irene. I set the letter down on the table, heart beating faster. What would it mean? Jail? A fine? Would I be called to testify again? Was I ready? I didn't know. But I knew this. There had to be consequences. Not for revenge, but for the lesson. You can't just steal someone's home and expect silence to be the only price. I poured myself another cup of tea. The good kind, which I'd bought that morning from the grocer, who still remembered my name. Then I walked to the window and looked out over the yard. It needed work. So did I. But both could be saved. The knock came just past 9. Sharp, quick. Not the uncertain tap of a neighbor or mailman, but the precise rhythm of someone who expects to be answered. I stood still for a second, dish rag in hand, soap still clinging to my fingers. Another knock followed, harder. I opened the door. He looked nothing like his emails. Mr. Dane Carmichael, assistant to the district attorney, Financial Crimes Unit, was young. Too young. His suit was pressed, his hair too neat, his shoes polished in that way that only city boys care about. "Mrs. Morris?" he asked, already knowing. I nodded. "You're early." He gave a polite smile. "I like mornings." That made one of us. He stepped inside after I gestured, notebook in hand, taking in the house with a glance that was too quick not to be practiced. "Mind if I record our conversation?" he asked, pulling out a small device. I shook my head. "Go ahead. Just don't expect me to speak fast." He chuckled, a little too eagerly. "Take all the time you need." He sat across from me in the kitchen, the same chair where Claire once opened my birthday cards and tucked away the money inside. I wiped my hands, poured tea for both of us, and then sat. I didn't ask why he came. I knew. "I wanted to meet in person," he began, flipping open his notebook, "because your case has unique circumstances." That's one way to put it. "Technically," he said, choosing his words, "you've already resolved the property issue through civil court, which is good. But during that process, certain documents came to light. Signatures, timelines, evidence that points to possible criminal conduct." "You mean the fake notary stamp?" His eyes lit up. "Yes, that caught our attention. She hadn't just rushed me into signing, she'd filed it without a witness, used someone else's name, and scribbled a notary certification that didn't exist. I hadn't noticed it. The judge had. Irene had laughed. Too arrogant to be careful. "So, here's where we are," Dane continued. "We're investigating potential fraud. And because the victim is considered elderly under state law, it could qualify as elder financial abuse." I sipped my tea. It had gone cold, but I didn't care. "If the case proceeds, you may be asked to testify. Are you prepared for that?" "No." He blinked. "I'm not prepared," I repeated, "but I'll do it anyway." He nodded slowly. "You understand this isn't about getting your house back." "I already got it back." "Yes, this is about making sure she doesn't do it again," I said flatly. "To me. Or anyone else." He studied me for a second, as if weighing something deeper than just words. "She has children, doesn't she?" he asked. "2. And where are they?" I set my cup down gently. "Not here." He closed his notebook. "We'll be in touch." After he left, I sat in the quiet for a long time. The kettle whistled again, needing attention. I ignored it. I wasn't sure what I felt. Satisfaction? Relief? No, not yet. Not until it hurt her the way she had hurt me. Not in vengeance, but in clarity. That evening, I sat in the living room with Irene. She still visited twice a week, always with a new paper to explain, or an article clipped from the paper. "She'll say you're destroying her life," Irene said, sipping sherry from one of the glasses I'd rescued from the attic. "She destroyed mine first. She'll say she was under pressure, that she didn't know better. She knew exactly what she was doing." Irene nodded. "Then let her prove otherwise." We clinked glasses. Later, I went through my old files, the ones she hadn't thrown out. Inside a yellowing envelope, I found photographs. Claire, age 5, holding a garden hose and laughing. Claire on her wedding day, looking like someone else entirely. Claire and me, side by side, both smiling, but only one of us meaning it. I traced my finger over the photo and then set it aside. Let the law do what it must. Let her learn what it means to lose not just a house, but a mother's silence. I hadn't seen Claire in over 6 weeks when the subpoena was delivered. It came in a plain envelope, hand-delivered by a woman in a beige coat who barely met my eyes. She didn't need to. The paper said enough. I unfolded it slowly at the kitchen table, my thumb trembling slightly along the edge. The seal of the State District Court stared back at me. Formal words, case numbers, date and time. Claire Morris, defendant. Jeanette Morris, complainant and key witness. There it was, in ink. What a strange thing to see your own child's name on a court summons because of you. And yet, I didn't feel guilt. Not exactly. Just a hollow sort of ache, like a bruise pressed too long. I placed the paper in the file folder with the rest and exhaled. One step closer. 2 days later, she showed up. Not at the door. I doubt she had the nerve for that. But on the sidewalk, just beyond the gate. I saw her from the window, pacing with her phone in hand, hair pulled back tight like it used to be when she was young and trying to look older. Now she just looked tired. I opened the door but didn't walk out. Let her cross the threshold, if she dared. She didn't. "I got the papers," she called, not quite loud enough for the neighbors, but close. "I know." She looked away, then back, her mouth tightening. "You're really doing this?" I didn't answer. "I could lose everything," she said. "Do you even care?" Now I stepped out. "Everything?" I said calmly. "You mean the car you bought with my house? The condo in Hartford? The spa packages I found on the receipts the judge subpoenaed? That wasn't your money, Mom." I almost laughed. "You're right, it was my house." She flushed. "You think this is justice?" "No," I said. "Justice would have been you keeping your word." Her arms crossed, defensive. "You're going to make me a criminal." "You made you a criminal," I corrected. "I just stopped pretending otherwise. I have kids. You used to have a mother, too." That was when her face cracked. For a second, the mask slipped. Just a flicker, barely a breath. And I saw something behind her eyes that wasn't anger. It was fear. "You could drop the charges," she said. Quieter now. "We could talk. Just us." "I did talk. You didn't listen." She took a shaky step forward, one hand raised. "Please, you don't have to do this." I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered the night she left. How she drove away without a backward glance, while I stood in the driveway with a single suitcase and nowhere to go. I remembered how she changed the locks before the sale was even finalized. I remembered the way she smiled when she lied. So I shook my head, slowly. "I'm not the one on trial, Claire." She stood there for a moment longer, frozen, and then turned and walked away. Not a word. Not a backward glance. Like mother, like daughter, but only in reverse. I went back inside and made myself a sandwich. Roast beef and mustard. Something simple, solid. Something you could bite into without flinching. That night, Irene called. "She tried the guilt angle?" she asked, already knowing. "Yes. She'll try worse before it's over. They always do." I stared at the clock. It was just past 10. I'd be expected in court next week. I'd testify. I'd look her in the eye. I'd tell the story I never wanted to tell. "She said I'm destroying her life," I murmured. Irene made a sound that was almost a snort. "Funny. She already destroyed yours and called it a favor." I didn't sleep well that night either. But when I did drift off, sometime past 3, I dreamed I was standing in my garden again, pulling weeds, and someone was watching me. Not Claire, not the neighbors. Someone quieter. A woman I used to be. She looked strong. I hope I still am. The courtroom wasn't what I expected. Smaller, colder. The walls a pale beige, the kind that makes everything feel like waiting. Rows of stiff chairs. A wooden podium with scratches along the edge, like dozens of nervous fingers had dug into it over the years. The judge's bench sat elevated, silent and imposing. Authority in oak. I sat in the second row, hands folded in my lap. Irene was beside me, not as a lawyer, not formally, but as someone who understood what it meant to stay upright when life tried to bend you in half. Claire came in late. She wore gray, not black, not navy. Gray. Something about it made me feel a strange mix of pity and satisfaction. She looked worn, pale, not from remorse but from fear, not used to being the one in the weak seat. Her lawyer, a polished man with sharp vowels and expensive glasses, did most of the talking. He leaned in close to her during the early part of the hearing, whispering things I couldn't hear. She nodded, obedient. Then the clerk called my name. "Jeanette Morris, please approach." I stood. My knees creaked, but I kept my spine straight. Every step I took toward the witness stand felt like climbing out of the pit she'd left me in. They swore me in. I sat. The microphone was too close, then too far. The judge gestured that I could speak whenever ready. So I did. I am 78 years old. I lived in the same house for 52 of those years. I raised a daughter there, buried a husband, planted 3 rose bushes and replaced the water heater twice. It was my home. I paused. Not because I lost my place, but because I wanted them to listen. Not just hear, listen. My daughter asked me to transfer the title into her name. She said it would be easier for taxes, for insurance, for paperwork. She said, and I quote, "You'll still live here, Mom. Nothing will change." I looked straight at Claire. 2 weeks later, she listed the property. 3 weeks later, it was sold. I had no place to go. There was a silence. Not uncomfortable, just still. Her lawyer stood. "Mrs. Morris, did you read the contract before signing?" "No." "Why not?" "Because I trusted her." He tilted his head. "And yet you claim she misled you." "She did. She knew what she was doing." "I didn't." He paused, flipped a page in his binder. "You didn't seek legal counsel?" "No." "You didn't ask for a witness?" "She said it wasn't necessary." He smiled faintly, like a teacher catching a student in contradiction. "So, you're saying you signed a legal document without fully understanding it?" "Yes." "And that's your daughter's fault?" I leaned forward. "I signed a document under false pretenses. She said I'd stay in my home. She promised care, companionship. She promised not to sell. She looked me in the eye and lied." The lawyer hesitated, then stepped back. Claire didn't look up once. The judge asked a few clarifying questions. My voice didn't shake. I didn't cry. I spoke like I'd practiced. But it wasn't rehearsal. It was memory. When I returned to my seat, Irene touched my hand. "You did well." The rest of the hearing passed in a blur. They called the notary expert, who confirmed the stamp was falsified. They read bank records. They showed emails. One in which Claire sent property details to her broker before the deed had even been finalized. My name came up again. So did words like undue influence, elder exploitation, intentional misrepresentation. When the session ended, the judge announced a recess before final arguments. We stepped into the hallway. Claire's eyes found mine for the first time since the proceedings began. She looked like a cornered animal, not because she was losing, but because the story was no longer hers to control. "You could still fix this," she said under her breath, glancing at the clerk nearby. "I already did." "You're ruining me." "No," I said, holding her gaze. "I'm revealing you." She turned away, walked toward the restroom, her heels too loud on the linoleum floor. I watched her go, remembering how I once held those same feet in my hands when she was a child, helping her with socks, tying tiny shoes, kissing scraped knees. Now those heels echoed like a verdict already passed, and I didn't feel sorry anymore. After court, I didn't go straight home. I took the long route instead. Walked 3 blocks to the diner I hadn't stepped into in over a year. The waitress recognized me instantly. "Miss Jeanette, haven't seen you in forever." I smiled. "Still make those lemon pies?" She winked. "Only for the good ones." I sat in the corner booth, same as always, and ordered a cup of coffee and a slice of pie. Not because I was hungry, but because I needed something normal. Something sweet that wasn't laced with bitterness. While I waited, I opened my notebook, the one I'd used to track every step of this mess. Hearing dates, letters sent, expenses, reactions. One page near the back held something different. A list with only one title, What She Took. I read it again. My home, my trust, the holidays, the feeling of being safe, photographs she threw away, my chair, my place at the table. It wasn't exhaustive, some losses you can't write down, but below it, another list had begun forming weeks ago. This one was titled, What I Took Back. My voice, the house, my name on the deed, my own dignity I was still adding to it. Maybe always would be. The waitress brought the pie. I took one bite and nearly cried. Not because of the flavor, because of the memory it carried. A time when sweetness was simple and nobody was stealing it out from under me. Back home, the garden greeted me with the smell of turned soil. I'd spent hours the previous weekend digging out the dead roots Claire had left behind. She didn't know much about plants. She'd laid down mulch over weeds, thinking that would fix things. Just like she'd layered gifts over guilt, silence over betrayal. But the earth doesn't forget, and neither do mothers. Inside, I checked the mailbox. A plain envelope from the DA's office. Inside, not a verdict, not yet, but a letter informing me the final hearing would be in 3 weeks. It would include sentencing if the jury found her guilty. If. That word lived like a stone under my ribs. What if they didn't? What if charm outweighed facts, or some clever defense twisted sympathy her way? Irene called that evening. "They won't let her walk," she said. "Too much documentation. Too many lies. But they might let her slide. She's not going to prison for 10 years, Jeanette. Don't look for fantasy. But there will be a record, and consequences. And that's more than most women like you ever get." I sighed. Women like me. Women they think won't fight back. We stayed silent for a moment, the line buzzing faintly. Then she added, "You know she'll come again." I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. "She'll come with something new, a different story. Maybe tears this time." "She's out of stories," I said. But I wasn't sure. Claire had always been clever. She could shift gears mid-lie, change tactics between sentences. She didn't cry often, only when it counted. I sat in the den that night, flipping through old family albums. So many birthdays. So many photographs of a child I once adored without question. There she was at 5, in a red sweater I'd knitted by hand. There at 11, holding her science fair ribbon. At 17, posing with friends I never met. At 29, holding her own child for the first time. In none of those pictures did she look cruel. Just unfinished. People don't turn overnight. They drift. Slide. Make one selfish choice, then another, until they forget where the center was. Still, forgetting doesn't excuse destroying. I closed the album and stood by the window. The wind chime I'd fixed last week clinked gently. The sky was soft with dusk. Somewhere far away, a train passed, low and steady. This was still my house, and I was still here, and I wasn't done. She came back 2 days later. No suitcase, no lawyer, no arrogance this time. Just Claire on my front step, holding a paper coffee cup and a canvas tote bag that sagged under its own weight. I saw her through the peephole before I opened the door. She looked small, not younger, just reduced. I opened the door but didn't move aside. "Don't worry," she said, voice soft. "I'm not here to fight." I said nothing. She held out the coffee like it was a peace offering. "Vanilla latte, extra milk, just how you like it." I looked at it, then back at her. "I'm not here for tricks, Mom," she added. "Can I just talk to you?" I stepped aside. Not because she deserved it, but because I wanted to hear what version of the story she'd rehearsed this time. She sat on the edge of the couch like a guest, like someone who didn't belong here. The mug stayed untouched in her hand. I remained standing. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry," she began. "Are you?" I asked. She blinked. "Yes." "For what?" She hesitated, a beat too long. "For hurting you," she said. "For breaking your trust." "That's not what the court says." "I know." She placed the cup on the coffee table, my table, and opened her bag. Inside were papers. I stiffened. "Don't worry," she said quickly. "It's not what you think. They're letters. From me. To you. Ones I never sent. I started writing them after the hearing." I didn't move. She pulled one out, handwritten, folded carefully. "You can read them later, or not. I just needed you to know I was thinking about it. About everything." "Claire," I said, voice low. "What do you want?" She looked up, eyes wide, not tearful, but trying. "I want a chance to fix things. You had that chance." "No, I mean, after all this, after the trial, whatever happens, I want to rebuild." I crossed my arms. "Rebuild what?" She looked down, ashamed or pretending to be. "Us." I almost laughed. Instead, I stepped closer. "Do you remember what you said when I asked you to hold off on the sale?" She was quiet. "You said, 'It's done, Mom. Grow up. Things change.'" My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "Now that things have changed for you, suddenly you want softness. I made a mistake." "No," I said. "You made a plan. And I was just in the way." Her shoulders sagged. "Then what do you want from me?" "Nothing," I said plainly. "Not anymore." She nodded slowly, defeated. "I understand. I don't think you do." She stood, gathered her bag. "I'll go." At the door, she turned once more. "Just so you know, if I lose in court, I might lose my job, my license, everything." I met her eyes. "Then you'll finally understand what it feels like." She didn't respond, just walked down the porch steps, her gait slower than usual. Not humble, just tired, or empty. That night, I sat with Irene on the back porch. The stars were faint, too many clouds. But the wind was warm. "She's trying another angle," Irene said, sipping her tea. "She brought me coffee. She'll bring you tears next. Maybe stories about the kids. She already played that card. Then she's running out of them." We sat in silence a while. The air smelled of fresh soil. I'd been tending to the garden again. Irene was right. Healing comes slow, but it comes. "I keep thinking I should feel worse," I murmured. "She's my child." "She was your child," Irene corrected gently. "Now she's a woman who made choices. And you're a woman who's finally allowed to make her own. The wind chime above us stirred. Inside the house, Claire's letters remained unread. Maybe I'd open one. Maybe I wouldn't. But either way, I was done being the only one paying the price for someone else's decisions. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. Typed. Official. No envelope fluff, just the facts. The court was considering a motion from Claire's attorney to dismiss 2 of the charges. Procedural ambiguity, they claimed. No criminal intent. I read the words 3 times, each time slower than the last. No criminal intent. She'd emptied my life into a closing contract, sold the only home I had, lied in ink, abandoned me like expired milk. But apparently, to some, that didn't qualify as criminal. I took the paper to Irene. She didn't flinch. It's a tactic. Delay, confuse, reduce. Can they win it? She looked at me over her glasses. They'll try. So we prepared. Over the next days, we met twice daily. At my kitchen table, with yellow legal pads and folders spread out like war maps. Irene had a way of reading court documents, like recipes. She could find the missing ingredient in any line. But despite all her confidence, I could feel something shift. On Thursday, she arrived late, her walking stick tapping sharper than usual, and set down a heavy sigh along with her purse. "They're changing tone," she said. Her attorney's pushing emotional fatigue. He's painting her as overwhelmed, manipulated by real estate agents, unsure of what she was doing. "She's not stupid," I muttered. "Stupid isn't the defense. Vulnerable is." I stared at the tea I hadn't touched. "He wants to make her me." "Exactly." I leaned back, the chair creaking under my weight. "So now I'm the manipulator." "They won't say it that way," Irene said. "But they'll nudge it. They'll call it confusion, miscommunication, a misunderstanding between generations. And the fake notary? They'll say she didn't know, that she trusted the process. Unbelievable." I closed my eyes for a moment. The air felt heavier in the room. Somewhere outside, a lawnmower droned. Someone else's normal life humming along, while mine braced for battle. "Irene," I said quietly, "what if I lose?" "You won't." "But what if—" "You won't," she repeated, firmer. "But if you do, you still did what needed doing. You told the truth. You stopped pretending." That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Not from fear, not exactly, but from exhaustion. Legal exhaustion. Emotional exhaustion. The kind of fatigue that doesn't touch the body, only the soul. My phone buzzed around midnight. A message. Not from Claire, from her lawyer. Short, cold, professional. "My client would like to resolve this matter privately. If you are open to negotiation, please contact my office." There it was, the olive branch made of plastic. I didn't respond, but the message dug under my skin like a splinter. What did resolve mean to them? Drop the charges? Sign an apology letter? Split the difference on a home that had been mine since the Reagan administration? Resolve. What a pretty word for shut up. The next morning, I brewed coffee and walked down the street to the post office. The lady behind the counter greeted me by name. I hadn't realized how much that still meant, being remembered, even in small places. I mailed a response, not to the lawyer, to the court. Irene helped me draft it. A statement reaffirming my position, that I would not agree to dismissal, that the financial harm was real, that the betrayal went beyond money, that it fractured something no property could repair. When I returned home, the roses were blooming again. One of the bushes I'd nearly given up on, the one Claire had called pointless, had sprouted 3 deep red blossoms overnight. Sometimes roots survive neglect. Sometimes survival is the answer. I cut one rose, placed it in a glass on the kitchen table, and sat beside it in silence. Let them argue. Let them twist words. Let them try. I wasn't moving. The envelope was thick. I almost didn't notice it at first, tucked between a grocery flyer and a credit card offer in the mailbox. But the return address made me pause. State Licensing Office, Division of Notaries Public. I tore it open at the kitchen table, my thumb unsteady, not from nerves, but from something deeper. The quiet ache of hope. Inside were 3 documents. The first was a letter confirming the inquiry Irene had submitted on my behalf. Weeks ago, requesting verification of the notary public, whose stamp appeared on my deed transfer. The second was a formal response. No active or inactive notary license exists under the name Thomas G. Whitaker in this state within the last 15 years. The third page held an enlarged image of the fraudulent stamp, the one Claire had submitted with the deed, beside the state's official record of notary registrations. They didn't match. Not even close. The stamp wasn't real. The name didn't exist. The entire notarization process, the legal formality meant to protect elderly citizens like me, had been fabricated. I set the papers down, exhaling sharply. Proof. Not just my word. Not emotion. Not broken promises or ethical failure. This was different. This was criminal. I called Irene. She didn't answer right away. When she did, her voice was low. She was at her doctor's. Something about blood pressure. I told her I had something urgent. Is it Claire? She asked. No, I said. It's the stamp. She paused. Tell me everything. I read the letter aloud. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, the line went quiet. Irene? That's your hammer, she said finally. That's what nails the case. I thought it already was. She made a quiet noise, not quite a laugh. The court doesn't move on feeling, Jeanette. It moves on proof. And now I had it. We brought the documents to the district attorney's office the next morning. Dane Carmichael met us in the narrow waiting area, his tie slightly crooked, dark rings under his eyes. When I handed him the letter, his eyebrows rose. Where did you get this? Official inquiry, I said. Irene submitted it on my behalf. He scanned the page quickly, then again, slower. We can admit this, he said. This changes things. Big time. He didn't smile, not exactly, but there was something like respect in his tone now. A week later, the hearing reconvened. Claire didn't look at me when I entered the courtroom. She wore the same gray suit, but her posture was different, stiffer, as if her bones were trying to defend her. When the judge called the session to order, Dane stood with the documents in hand. Your Honor, we'd like to enter new evidence. Certified statement from the State Notary Division confirming the absence of any record for the stamp used in the defendant's deed filing. The judge took the pages, read silently, expression unreadable. Claire's lawyer stood, frowning. We request a delay to review. Request denied, the judge said, not looking up. The evidence is clear. Fraudulent notarization is not a procedural slip. Claire paled. Her lawyer leaned toward her, whispering furiously. And still, she wouldn't look at me. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, feeling something shift inside. Not joy, not revenge, just weight, sliding off bone. They spent the rest of the hearing trying to minimize. It was a clerical error. She relied on the broker. She didn't understand the formality of the notary system. But the document was there. The non-existent name. The fabricated seal. The proof that what she did wasn't just cruel. It was illegal. And the court saw it now. When the judge adjourned, he announced that sentencing would be decided within the month. I stood slowly. Claire remained seated, her eyes fixed on the table in front of her. No tears, no rage, just silence. I wondered what it sounded like in her head. The walk out of the courtroom felt different this time. Lighter, not finished, not yet, but certain. Back home, I placed the notary letter in the front of the folder. First page, first nail. I'd won battles already. Now I was building the gallows, not for her downfall, but for the lies she'd hung between us all these years, and I wasn't done pulling them down. She came one last time, not with coffee, not with papers or bags or apologies, just herself, small and quiet, standing outside my garden gate in the early morning light, clutching something in her hand. I saw her from the window, same as always. For a moment, I didn't move. Let her wait. The roses had bloomed again, bold, red, and stubborn. I liked that they didn't ask permission. They just came back, season after season, like memory with thorns. I opened the door, stepped outside, and leaned against the railing. She didn't speak right away. Then, "It's not going away, is it?" I shook my head. "No," I said. "It's not." She looked down at the folded paper in her hand, then held it out. "What's that?" "A letter," she said. "For the court. I haven't submitted it yet." I didn't take it. "What does it say?" "That I didn't mean to hurt you." I almost laughed. "You keep thinking that matters." She pressed her lips together. "It matters to me. Too late." Silence again. The wind picked up, light but firm. The old wind chime over the porch stirred, singing its soft, cracked song. Claire looked older than she had in months. Not from makeup or stress. From wear. Like the mask had worn out, and all that was left was the face underneath. "I'm going to lose everything," she said quietly. I stayed still. She wasn't lying this time. I could feel it. Her job was already on review. Her license, if revoked, would take years to rebuild. The fine would be steep, and the record, that would never wash off. But what was I supposed to do with that? She stepped closer to the gate. "I'm not asking you to drop it. I know you won't. But could you write something? Just to the judge. About who I used to be." I stared at her. "Who you used to be." She nodded. "You could say I'm not a threat. That I'm not cruel. That I just made mistakes." I stepped down from the porch, walked slowly toward her. "You want me to write a letter saying you didn't mean it," I said, my voice calm. "Yes." "You want me to tell them you're a good person?" "Yes." I stood on the other side of the fence, eye to eye. "Do you know what I wrote the night I was evicted?" I asked. She looked unsure. "No." I wrote down everything I could remember that made me feel small. Every word you used when I asked questions. Every time you rolled your eyes. Every time you sighed when I walked into the room. Every "God, Mom, not now," and every closed door. I wrote it all down. She shifted, uncomfortable. "Then I wrote what it felt like," I continued. "To pack my things in silence. To call shelters. To sign into a state-run facility that smelled like bleach and loneliness. To sleep next to a stranger. To wake up to a world that had already replaced me." Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. "You don't get to ask for a character reference," I said. "Not from the woman whose life you dismantled piece by piece." "I didn't know it would go this far," she whispered. You were counting on that, I replied. You were counting on me to stay silent. I thought you'd forgive me. I took a breath. I did, I said. She blinked. I forgave you the minute I realized you'd never be the daughter I hoped for. I forgave you because I needed to be free. But forgiveness doesn't mean I'll protect you from consequences. She looked away, nodding slowly. I understand, she said, barely audible. Then she turned, walked back down the path, past the sidewalk, into the street. No screaming, no begging, no threats, just the sound of her shoes on pavement and the quiet behind her. I didn't watch her go this time. I turned and walked back inside. The wind chime rang once more, softer now. And inside, the house felt still, not hollow, not angry, still, like it had finally exhaled. The offer came in a pale blue envelope. No email this time, no phone call, just a letter. Soft paper, elegant font. All the things people use when they want to make wrongdoing look respectable. Inside was a formal settlement proposal. Claire's lawyer offering to plead to a reduced charge in exchange for no jail time. She would pay restitution, issue a public apology, undergo rehabilitation. The words sounded ridiculous. This wasn't shoplifting. The last line was what caught me. Our client hopes to resolve this matter amicably without further damage to the family bond. I read it 3 times, slowly. Family bond. As if there was something left unbroken. As if a bond were a vase. Cracked, yes, but still able to hold water if only we were careful not to bump it again. I folded the letter and placed it on the table. Then I walked to the sink and washed my hands. Slowly. The way I used to after gardening, when the dirt wouldn't come out from under my nails and the air still smelled like root and sun. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the den, lights off, only the hum of the old refrigerator keeping time. I stared at the ceiling, the corners of the room, the old photos on the mantel. I counted the years I'd lived in this house. 52. The number had weight. Claire had occupied it for 8. 8 years between her divorce and her escape. 8 years of promises, tension, silent dinners, and sharp glances over teacups. 8 years that ended with a signature and a box of my things on the curb. She'd called it starting over. Now she wanted mercy. In the morning, I called Dane Carmichael. I got the letter, I said. Yes, he replied, cautious. It's a standard offer. You're not obligated to accept. I don't. He paused. You're sure? I'm sure. Another pause, then we'll proceed. We hung up without ceremony. Later, Irene came by. I showed her the letter, let her read it at her own pace. When she was done, she didn't ask what I was going to do. She already knew. Instead, she poured us both tea and said, "She'll hate you for this. She already does. She'll say you're bitter. I'm not. She'll say you're punishing her." I looked out the window. The roses were stronger now, the roots taking hold again, as if the soil had finally been given permission to breathe. "I'm not punishing her," I said. "I'm telling the truth, and I'm refusing to carry her shame for her." Irene nodded. "Then you're doing it right." We sat in silence after that. Comfortable, earned silence. In the following days, the court date was confirmed. Final hearing. Sentencing to follow within 48 hours. I received 3 more messages from Claire's lawyer. None aggressive. All polite. All urging reconsideration. I didn't respond. My silence was not avoidance. It was finality. 2 nights before the hearing, I walked through the house, touched the walls, ran my fingers along the banister, opened the drawers I'd once packed in a panic, thinking I'd never return. In the hallway closet, behind the coats, I found the old wooden box my husband built the year before he died. Inside were the letters Claire had written me from college, when she still believed in things, postcards from summer internships, a pressed flower she'd taped to a card with the words, "To the best mom in the world." I sat on the floor and held the flower in my palm. It had faded, fragile now, but it hadn't crumbled. I placed it back in the box, gently, and closed the lid. There are things I would always carry, but not for her. Not anymore. The courtroom was warmer than usual, or maybe I just felt stronger. I wore navy, not black, not mourning, something firm. I pinned my hair back the way I used to when Claire was young, and I was still learning to speak up for myself. Irene came with me. She didn't need to. She wasn't called as a witness, but she came anyway, like a quiet shadow that wouldn't leave when things got hard. Claire sat on the left side of the room with her lawyer. Her suit looked more expensive this time, her makeup subtle. She was trying to look smaller, softer, like a woman the court might pity. I didn't pity her. The judge entered. Everyone stood. The clerk read out the charges again, line by line, count by count. Fraud, misrepresentation, falsified documentation, financial abuse of a dependent adult. It sounded clinical, spoken aloud like that. Cold and exact. I sat still as stone. Claire's lawyer made one final statement. "She has never committed a crime before," he said. "She regrets her actions. She has expressed remorse. She is a single mother, a dedicated employee, and her children rely on her." It was polished, designed to catch mercy like a net, but it couldn't hold. Dane stood next. "Your Honor," he said, steady and calm, "what happened here is not just a mistake. It's a betrayal. This defendant didn't act out of desperation. She acted out of convenience. She made choices. She took advantage of her mother's trust, her age, and her vulnerability. And she did so not once, but through every step, from coercion to paperwork to the sale to abandonment." He paused, not for effect, but for air. And then she walked away. He let the silence sit. Then he looked at me, just a glance, before turning back to the bench. "The people ask for accountability, not revenge, not punishment beyond measure, but real consequence. Because without it, what's the message? That love can be weaponized without penalty?" He sat down. The judge leaned forward. His voice was low but clear. "I've reviewed the evidence. I've read the statements, including the ones not read in court. I've considered the nature of the crime, the defendant's history, and the impact on the victim." He looked at Claire then. "Ms. Morris, you exploited your mother, someone who raised you, trusted you, and depended on your care. You falsified documents, misled multiple parties, and showed no credible remorse until legal consequences became likely." Claire shifted, her hands clenched in her lap. The judge continued, unwavering. "You willfully violated both the law and the most basic ethical expectation between parent and child." He paused. "For that, this court finds you guilty on all counts." I exhaled, quietly, fully. The sentence was not dramatic. It wasn't the kind that makes headlines. Claire was given 18 months probation, a substantial fine, and a permanent mark on her record. The restitution amount was confirmed. A formal no-contact order was placed, at my request. No jail. I hadn't asked for it, but she wouldn't walk away untouched. The record would follow her. So would the truth. As the courtroom emptied, She looked back once, just once, and our eyes met. There was nothing left to say. I didn't feel triumph. No victory cry rose up inside me. I felt settled, as if the ground under me had stopped shaking. Outside the courthouse, Irene lit a cigarette she wasn't supposed to have. "You did it," she said. I shook my head. "No," I said. "I just stopped pretending she didn't." We didn't go out to celebrate. We didn't toast. We just rode back in her old sedan, with the windows cracked and the radio playing something soft. At home, the house greeted me like it knew. The door didn't creak. The floor didn't groan. I stood in the hallway for a long time, looking at the framed photo on the wall, the one Claire hadn't taken down. It was me, younger, holding a basket of laundry, laughing at something long forgotten. She used to say it was her favorite photo of me. Now it was mine, because I looked like someone who still believed the world could be good, and I didn't want to hate her for that. I took it off the wall, wiped the glass with my sleeve, and set it on the mantel. Then I sat down in my chair, my real chair, not the one she bought to replace it, and watched the light shift through the windows as the house exhaled with me. It was over, and I was home. The silence was the loudest part. No more court dates, no more phone calls, no letters in the mailbox from lawyers, no knocks on the door, hesitant or smug. Just stillness. It crept in slowly, the way early frost does. Quiet, steady. At first, I mistook it for peace, but peace is a decision. Silence just arrives. Some mornings, I'd wake up and forget, for 5 seconds, that anything had changed. I'd shuffle into the kitchen expecting a voice to greet me, a coffee mug already on the counter. I'd reach for 2 slices of toast instead of 1. Then I'd remember. Claire was gone. Not just from the house, from everything. After the sentencing, she disappeared from public life. No more Facebook updates, no more phone calls to cousins. Even her work profile vanished. On indefinite leave, someone said. The children were with their father more now. I heard bits through neighbors, whispers, people trying not to look too curious. I never told them anything. Not because I wanted to protect her, but because some stories are meant to be owned, not retold. I kept the house warm, repainted the porch, had the roof checked, replanted the lilies along the side wall that she'd always called messy. I liked their defiance. They bloomed crooked, on their own time. One day, I walked into the hardware store, and the clerk behind the counter, young, maybe 20, said, "Aren't you the lady from the case?" I froze. He saw it. "Sorry," he added quickly. "My mom was talking about it. Said you were brave." I didn't know how to respond. Brave. What a strange word for someone who'd simply told the truth out loud. Later that week, a letter arrived. This one handwritten, the envelope smudged. No return address. I recognized the handwriting instantly. Claire. I opened it slowly. My hands didn't shake. "I know you won't answer. I don't blame you. But I need you to know I've moved out of the state. I'm getting help. Real help. I don't expect anything, but I needed to say it. I ruined everything. I know that now. You didn't destroy me, Mom. I did." It was signed without flourish. Just her name, no love, no pleading, just an echo. I placed it in a drawer, not because I forgave her again, I'd done that already, but because some truths don't belong in the trash. They just don't belong on display. Irene came by on Thursday, as she always did. Brought me a new set of curtain ties and a lemon tart from the bakery. "You look lighter," she said. "I feel Finished, I answered. She smiled. That's rarer than people think. We sat in the garden afterward. The roses were full again. I'd trimmed the dead stems myself. Some blooms still leaned sideways, stubborn, flawed. I don't miss her, I said suddenly. Irene didn't flinch. You don't have to. I don't hate her either. That's the goal. I watched a bee disappear into one of the blossoms. I used to wonder what it would be like if she apologized, meant it, fell apart crying, promised to rebuild. And now? I'm glad she didn't. Why? Because I might have believed her. Irene chuckled, that dry, unfiltered sound I'd come to love. That's the danger with people like that. You don't stop loving them. You just stop letting them use it. We sat a while longer. That night, I lit a candle before bed. Not for anyone. Not as a prayer. Just for warmth. Light. The house held it well. No drafts anymore. No uneven hum in the walls. It was quiet. But it was no longer silence. Sometimes I catch myself counting. How many steps from the front door to the garden gate? How many spoons left from the old silver set? How many letters I've written and never sent? But mostly, I count the quiet. Not the absence of sound. I've lived alone before. But this quiet is different. It isn't waiting for anyone. It isn't nervous. It doesn't ache. It just is. This morning I swept the porch. The boards are still good. 40 years and they haven't splintered. A man from the county once told me they don't make wood like this anymore. I believe him. Things now are built to be replaced, not kept. But I kept this house. Claire's name is nowhere near the deed. No fine print. No invisible ink. Just mine. Jeanette Morris. Black letters on white paper, filed with the county clerk, recorded with the right stamps. Sometimes I sit with the folder in my lap, not because I need reassurance, but because proof, once stolen, feels sweeter when it's yours again. I thought the ending would feel bigger, that there'd be some release, some music swelling beneath me, a moment when I'd shout or laugh or cry. But it didn't come that way. It came quietly. One morning, I poured coffee, fed the birds, and realized I hadn't thought of her name in 2 whole days, not out of spite, just absence. That's when I knew I was free. Not of her. She's part of the soil now. Like the years she lived here. The way she used to hum when she cleaned the sink. The smell of her shampoo in the hallway. Some things you don't erase. They settle. They change shape. But freedom is knowing you don't have to hold them. That they don't get to shape you. I didn't write the judge a final letter. I didn't burn Claire's things. I didn't box up the past. I left what needed leaving. And I stayed. The garden's thriving. I planted lavender this year, in spite of what she once said about it being too messy, too wild. It is wild. That's the point. I find myself laughing more now, not loudly, not for show, but the kind that slips out when something's truly funny, or just gently true. I don't perform for anyone anymore. This is my house. This is my life. And if you're reading this, if some part of you stayed through all of this, then maybe you've lost something too, or almost did. Maybe someone tried to shrink your life to fit their plans. Don't let them. You don't have to scream. You don't have to burn things down. But you can take it back. And you can stay. The last rose bloomed yesterday. Pale pink. Almost white. The kind you have to look at twice to really see. I didn't cut it. I left it there. Some things aren't meant for vases. They're meant to be left alone. growing wild, exactly where they belong, like dignity, like peace, like me. If this story stayed with you, share it. Leave a comment. Tell someone, not for me, but for someone who still thinks silence is safer than truth.